My parents read my obituary at the funeral. Then I walked in. The rain hammered against the windshield as Marina Chen gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white. She was driving home from her college graduation ceremony in Portland, eager to surprise her parents in Seattle. The interstate stretched endlessly ahead, slick with water that reflected her headlights like scattered diamonds. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages, but she kept her eyes focused on the treacherous road ahead. She had spent 4 years studying journalism, and tonight she wanted to celebrate with her family. In the passenger seat lay her diploma, carefully protected in its leather folder, a symbol of her achievement. The accident happened in a split second when a deer bounded onto the highway from the dense forest. Marina swerved hard to the right, her car spinning wildly across the wet asphalt before crashing into trees. The impact sent her vehicle tumbling down a steep embankment, metal grinding against rocks and branches. Marina's consciousness faded as sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing moment. Emergency responders arrived to find a scene of devastation, with debris scattered across a wide area. They found Marina's purse thrown clear of the wreckage, its contents scattered and waterlogged beyond recognition. At Mercy General Hospital, 2 hours away, Marina lay unconscious with severe head trauma and no identification. The medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize her condition, but she remained in a deep coma for days. Her face was swollen beyond recognition, and her dark hair had been shaved off for emergency brain surgery. The hospital staff called her Jane Doe, not knowing that somewhere, her family was desperately searching. Marina's parents, David and Susan Chen, had already identified a body they believed was their daughter. The Chen family gathered at Morrison Funeral Home, their hearts shattered by grief and disbelief. David Chen, a software engineer, stood frozen beside the closed casket, unable to process the reality. The church sanctuary was decorated with white lilies, Marina's favorite flowers since childhood. Outside, the storm that had caused the accident finally began to clear, revealing patches of blue sky. The morning of the funeral dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the family's overwhelming darkness. Susan Chen stood before her closet, unable to choose what to wear to her daughter's final goodbye. David paced the kitchen, coffee growing cold in his hands as he rehearsed the eulogy he'd written. The obituary lay folded on the dining table, words that seemed impossible but were about to be spoken. Marina's childhood bedroom remained untouched, her textbooks still stacked on the desk from winter break. The weight of planning a funeral for their only child had aged the Chen parents' years in just days. Meanwhile, at Mercy General Hospital, Marina stirred for the first time in 5 days of unconsciousness. Her eyelids fluttered open slowly, confusion clouding her vision as she tried to focus on the ceiling. Nurse Rodriguez noticed the movement immediately and rushed to Marina's bedside with barely contained excitement. Marina tried to speak, but her throat was raw from the breathing tube that had been removed yesterday. Marina's memories came back in fragments, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle slowly falling into place. When she finally managed to whisper her name, the medical staff exchanged glances of relief and concern. Dr. Williams explained gently that she had been in an accident and unconscious for almost a week. Marina's heart raced as she learned about her injuries and the amnesia that had stolen precious days. Marina insisted on calling her parents, her hands shaking as she dialed the familiar number from memory. The phone rang and rang at the Chen household, but no one answered because they were at church. Panic began to set in as Marina realized something was terribly wrong with the silence on the line. A terrible realization began to dawn on her as she overheard nurses discussing missing person reports. At St. Mary's Church, the congregation gathered in solemn black attire, filling every available pew. The Chen family sat in the front row, surrounded by relatives who had traveled from across the country. David Chen clutched the folded obituary in his jacket pocket, dreading the moment he would have to speak. Susan held Marina's graduation photo against her chest. Unable to believe her daughter was really gone, the church organist began playing Amazing Grace, Marina's favorite hymn since her confirmation years ago. The morning sun streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the grieving congregation. Father Mackenzie's voice echoed through the sanctuary as he began the memorial service with traditional prayers. He spoke of Marina's bright spirit, her dedication to journalism, and her dream of telling important stories. The congregation listened in reverent silence, many dabbing their eyes with tissues provided by the ushers. Sarah, Marina's college roommate, approached the podium to share memories of late-night study sessions and laughter. She described Marina's infectious optimism and her ability to find hope in even the darkest news stories. The audience smiled through their tears as Sarah recounted Marina's determination to change the world through writing. Marina's high school English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, spoke about her students' exceptional talent and compassion. Each speaker painted a picture of a young woman whose life had been cut tragically, short by circumstance. The weight of loss hung heavy in the air as the service progressed toward David's reading of the obituary. Back at the hospital, Marina had convinced the nurses to help her access a computer to search for information. Her heart stopped when she found her own obituary online, dated for today, with funeral services at St. Mary's. The photograph accompanying the article showed her smiling face from her college graduation just 1 week ago. Marina stared at the screen in disbelief, reading about her own life and death in black and white text. Dr. Williams arrived to find her sobbing uncontrollably. Pointing at the computer screen with trembling fingers, the medical team quickly realized the horrible mistake that had led to Marina being declared dead. Marina begged them to call the funeral home immediately, but the staff explained they couldn't interrupt the service. Against medical advice, Marina insisted on leaving the hospital to reach the church before it was too late. Dr. Williams reluctantly agreed to discharge her, knowing that time was running out to prevent further trauma. A hospital volunteer drove Marina towards St. Mary's Church at dangerous speeds through the city streets. Marina borrowed a nurse's cardigan to cover her hospital gown, her appearance shocking after days of medical care. Her head was still bandaged from surgery, and her face bore the fading bruises of the terrible accident. She tried calling her parents' cell phones repeatedly, but they had turned them off during the funeral service. The volunteer, Mrs. Thompson, offered words of encouragement while navigating through unexpected traffic construction. Marina's anxiety peaked as she imagined her family's grief and the trauma her sudden appearance would cause. She rehearsed what she would say, how she could possibly explain her miraculous survival and return. The church spire came into view as they rounded the final corner, and Marina's heart pounded with anticipation. She could see the parking lot filled with cars, knowing that inside, people were mourning her supposed death. Inside the church, David Chen slowly rose from his seat, the obituary unfolding in his trembling hands. The congregation fell silent as he approached the podium, his footsteps echoing in the sacred space. Susan watched her husband with breaking heart, knowing how difficult this moment would be for him. David cleared his throat and began reading about Marina's birth, her childhood achievements, and her academic success. He described her love for writing, her plans for the future, and the dreams that would never be fulfilled. The words felt surreal as he spoke them, each sentence a reminder of the daughter they had lost forever. Tears streamed down his face as he reached the final paragraph about Marina's impact on everyone who knew her. The church remained absolutely silent, except for the quiet sounds of weeping from the gathered mourners. Just as David prepared to read the closing lines, the heavy wooden doors at the back of the church creaked open. A shaft of bright sunlight cut through the church's dim interior as the doors swung wide open. Marina stood silhouetted in the doorway, her bandaged head and borrowed clothes creating a startling apparition. The congregation turned in unison, gasps and murmurs rippling through the crowd like a wave of disbelief. David's voice caught in his throat mid-sentence, the obituary fluttering from his hands to the floor below. Susan Chen stood up so quickly that she knocked over her purse, its contents scattering across the pew. Marina took her first tentative steps down the center aisle, her legs still weak from days of bed rest. The silence was deafening, except for the sound of her bare feet against the cold stone floor. Father Mackenzie gripped the edges of his pulpit, unsure whether he was witnessing a miracle or hallucination. Marina's eyes locked with her father's across the sanctuary, both of them frozen in the impossible moment. "Mom? Dad?" Marina's voice cracked as she spoke, barely audible but cutting through the stunned silence. Susan Chen let out a strangled cry and stumbled into the aisle, her legs barely supporting her weight. David remained at the podium, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were clearly seeing before him. Marina moved faster now, her strength returning as she rushed toward her parents with desperate urgency. The congregation remained paralyzed, some standing, others still seated, all unable to believe the scene unfolding. Marina's college friends began to weep openly, their grief transforming instantly into overwhelming joy and confusion. Mother and daughter collided in the middle of the aisle, Susan's arms wrapping around Marina's fragile frame. The impact of their embrace sent shockwaves through the church as the reality of Marina's survival hit everyone. David finally moved, dropping the microphone as he rushed down from the altar to join his family. The three of them clung together in the center aisle, sobbing with relief, confusion, and overwhelming emotion. Marina tried to explain through her tears about the accident, the hospital, and her lost days of memory. Susan couldn't stop touching her daughter's face, needing physical confirmation that this wasn't a cruel dream. David held them both tightly, his strong frame shaking with the intensity of emotions he couldn't contain. The congregation slowly began to understand that they were witnessing not a funeral, but a reunion miracle. Father Mackenzie approached the family carefully, offering prayers of thanksgiving instead of mourning. Marina's friends surged forward, creating a circle of love and support around the reunited Chen family. The flowers meant for a funeral now seemed like celebration decorations for an impossible homecoming. Mrs. Harrison, the funeral director, quietly began making phone calls to cancel the burial arrangements. As the initial shock wore off, Marina explained about the misidentification and her amnesia-induced absence. The hospital had been searching for her family, while her family had been mourning her supposed death. David helped Marina to a pew, his protective instincts taking over as he noticed her obvious physical weakness. Susan called Dr. Williams to ensure Marina had been properly discharged and to schedule follow-up appointments. The congregation gradually transformed from mourners into celebrants, their tears now expressing joy instead of grief. Marina looked around at all the people who had come to honor her memory and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She realized how deeply she was loved and how much her life meant to so many people. The obituary lay forgotten on the church floor, its words now obsolete in the face of this miraculous reality. Father Mackenzie suggested they hold an impromptu service of thanksgiving instead of continuing the memorial. The following days brought a whirlwind of medical appointments, legal paperwork, and emotional adjustments for everyone. Marina had to prove she was alive to insurance companies, banks, and various government agencies. The bureaucratic process of resurrection proved almost as challenging as her physical recovery from the accident. Dr. Williams monitored her progress carefully, concerned about potential long-term effects from the head trauma. Marina struggled with survivor's guilt, knowing that another family had lost their daughter in the misidentification. The Chen family attended the correct funeral for the actual victim, paying their respects with heavy hearts. Marina's return to normal life was complicated by media attention after the story spread through local news. Reporters wanted to interview the girl who attended her own funeral, but the family requested privacy. The experience had changed all of them profoundly, altering their perspectives on life, death, and family bonds. Susan Chen found herself checking on Marina multiple times each night, needing reassurance that she was still there. David installed a new security system and insisted on knowing Marina's whereabouts at all times. Marina understood their protective behavior, but struggled with the loss of independence she'd fought to achieve. Family therapy sessions helped them process the trauma and learn healthy ways to cope with anxiety. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, their counselor, guided them through exercises to rebuild trust and communication. Marina's college friends visited frequently, bringing normalcy and laughter back into her daily routine. Sarah, her roommate, helped Marina catch up on assignments and prepare for delayed final examinations. The journalism department at Portland State offered to let Marina finish her degree through independent study. Slowly, the family began to establish new routines that honored both their trauma and their gratitude. Marina's memory of the accident remained frustratingly incomplete, with doctors explaining this was a common after-trauma. She remembered the rain, the deer, and the sensation of losing control, but nothing after the initial impact. Physical therapy helped rebuild her strength and coordination, though she still tired easily during long days. The scar from her brain surgery served as a permanent reminder of how close she had come to death. Marina decided to write about her experience, turning her survival story into her senior journalism thesis. She interviewed the medical staff who had cared for her, learning about their perspective on her case. The project helped her process her emotions while creating something meaningful from her traumatic experience. Her professors were amazed by the depth and insight she brought to her writing about life and mortality. Marina realized that surviving had given her a unique perspective on the stories she wanted to tell. 3 months after the funeral that never was, Marina graduated with her journalism degree in a private ceremony. The Chen family celebrated quietly at home, grateful for second chances and the gift of being together. Marina had accepted a position at the Seattle Times, covering human interest stories and community events. Her first published article was about the importance of proper identification procedures in emergency situations. The piece led to policy changes at local hospitals and emergency response agencies throughout the state. Marina found purpose in using her experience to help prevent similar tragedies from happening to other families. She kept in touch with the medical staff at Mercy General, particularly Nurse Rodriguez, who had cared for her. The hospital asked her to speak at their annual conference about patient advocacy and family communication. Marina's story became a testament to the importance of never giving up hope, even in the darkest circumstances. A year after the accident, Marina stood before the same church where her funeral had been held. This time, she was there for a celebration of life event that she had organized for the community. The memorial honored the young woman who had actually died in the crash, whose identity had been confused. Marina spoke about the responsibility she felt to live fully in honor of the life that had been lost. Marina's relationship with her parents had evolved into something deeper and more appreciative than before. They no longer took simple moments for granted, finding joy in ordinary conversations and shared meals. David had become more emotionally expressive, telling Marina he loved her several times each day. The three of them took monthly weekend trips together, creating new memories to balance the painful ones. On quiet evenings, Marina often reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought her back. She thought about the congregation of people who had gathered to mourn her, and how much she was loved. The experience had taught her that life was precious and unpredictable, but also that hope could survive anything. Marina kept a copy of her obituary in her desk drawer, reading it occasionally as a reminder. As Marina prepared for her second year as a professional journalist, She felt a deep sense of purpose. Her near-death experience had given her insights into life that enriched every story she chose to tell. The accident had taught her that tomorrow was never guaranteed, making each day feel like a gift. The Chen family had learned that love could survive even the darkest moments, making them stronger than ever.